Yeah, there was like a 9-year gap between my first two, and this was 2-year gap. But actually, like, I sold my two books, Redheaded Pilgrim and Horse Girl Fever, in the same week, which was just like that never happens. I had a story collection that was kind of ready and a novel that was kind of ready, and I thought the process was going to take a really long time, but I just sent them to two different publishers, and both took them. And then I had to kind of figure out how to space the projects apart so that they weren't kind of tripping over each other.
Like unagented, like you did it.
Unagented, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to, aside from, like, people like the books? But I feel like maybe, like, my read on it would be that Cult of Loretta generated some goodwill, and people kind of knew in the literary, like, indie lit world, kind of knew that you were a good writer and a funny writer, and then maybe were receptive to whatever else you had cooking.
Yeah, I think that Cult of Loretta was just it really was like a mini cult classic in a very specific small world, but like, I feel like it just made the rounds. And then, Eric from $2 Radio was like, told me that he loved the book and he was carrying it in his shop, and was sort of like, hey, next time you got something, hit me up. And similarly with Clash, Christoph and Lisa were both like, hey, we're huge fans of your work. If you ever want something our way. So I think just doing it for a long time, and then hearing firsthand from certain publishers who I really admire, that like, oh, they like my stuff, I think I have a good shot if I send it just directly to them without going the agent route. So
it's also that you're a funny writer. There aren't that many funny writers.
yeah, I think I've been talking about that like on some group chats and with friends, just because being funny on a page, I think, is different than being a comedian. It's like it's a different thing to be funny on a page, and it definitely I feel like it's it opens some doors, because it's refreshing. If nothing else, if somebody's laughing, they might hate the book, but if they're laughing, they're not going to hate it that much.
It's like the spoonful of sugar makes that medicine go down.
And it's funny when I'm writing like auto fiction ish type stuff, and I'll read a review on Goodreads, and they're like, I hated this guy. I'm like, fair, okay. But they're all like, I hated this guy, but it was really funny. I'm like, okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. At least you got him a little bit.
Yeah.
But what do you attribute the fact that you're a funny writer to? I mean, some of this stuff is just it's intrinsic, right? It's just kind of your response to reality, and maybe just whatever, like, neurology you have, and whatever internal voice and accumulation of influences. Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's my influences to some extent, but I think the moment I felt like I found my voice as a writer, like, okay, I'm doing something that doesn't sound like anyone else. It's when I tried to start writing absurd and funny work. And if I want to be a psychologist, I think it's because, I come from a family that doesn't talk about feelings a lot, and so there's like sometimes, in families like that where no one's like crying together or processing things, humor becomes like the only way that you can get those emotions out. So I think I found that writing funny fiction that had a lot of, like, it's always like dancing around the emotion, but it's not throwing the emotion in your face. And often it's making fun of something that should be pretty heavy. It just makes sense to me for some reason. I don't know. I resonate when writers can do that. And like I think I really like my favorite writers are like the World War II people who fought in World War II, and they all had PTSD, and they were all really funny. And I just really connect with that. When someone's telling you a joke and you're like, wait, this is actually really depressing, but then you're laughing out loud, and something about that just appeals to my constitution.
It feels like it's like the appropriate response to somebody who's really dealing with reality. And I know that, reality is a subjective term, but just the basic circumstances of the human thing, where we could go at any moment. We have no idea why we're here. What is this? And it's painful.
Yeah.
And I'm confused and afraid a lot, and it's hard to relate to other people in a meaningful way that lasts. I mean, these are all thematic concerns of yours. Like, what else are you going to do? I guess you could like jump off a bridge, or you could feel sorry for yourself and cry a lot, which has its merits. Or I think there's something kind of alchemical about trying to find a laugh.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, when someone is funny, I think humor is like the highest form of intelligence, more than like, being good at math or good at chess. Like, there's like, to say something that's like inherently surprising and shocks someone out of the present moment in a way that makes them like emit this sound is like a really, I think it's like a very zen, very strange thing that requires a lot of intelligence. And I, maybe I'm just saying that because if I'm branded as a funny writer, I'm positioning myself as the smartest guy out there. But no, I think that it's just,
but it's aspirational, I think, is what.
yeah. Yeah, like the books that blow me away, that stick with me, surprise the readers, and just take a hard left turn. And I think to make someone laugh, you have to surprise them, and to surprise them, you have to do something that hasn't been done before. Because the second it becomes a cliche, it's not funny anymore. So I don't know. There's something about that just it pulls me. I'm just, if I write too serious, I just don't believe in the gravity of what I'm writing anymore. But the second I throw in a couple jokes, it feels real to me. It feels the drama feels heavier. If that makes sense.
Well, what I think it was at Muhammad Ali. I never get these things right, but if somebody was like, it's, comedy is like the truth but faster. It's this old line about it that I think gets somewhere close to the heart of it.
Yeah.
Like somebody who's funny is saying the truth in maybe a novel way, or saying it quicker or more bluntly, and oftentimes is saying the things that often go unsaid. And it's interesting to me that you come from this family that was not maybe demonstratively emotional, and that this is like that kind of pressure. You know how, if we're going to like use geological comparisons, you know what I'm saying? To be like a rock forming under that kind of domestic geological pressure, like funny would be the result. I'm curious to know, like, what's the heritage that you have? Because my wife comes from a Scandinavian family in Minnesota that was very much this way, like a loving family, but like maybe like not a lot of hugging, if ever.
Yeah.
Nobody saying I love you, but everybody loving each other. Like it was just repressed in some kind of fundamental way.
Yeah, I mean, I think my family background on my dad's side, it's like Irish Catholic, so I think that that's like notoriously kind of
That'll do it.
an oppressed group, and that's not my whole family makeup, but I think that when you think about generational trauma or like the things we inherit, there's something about that particular side of the family that I think you could sense that there was like darkness or heaviness, but no one's talking about it. And as a kid, I think I just was like, there's something being unsaid in this room. And I was always felt mystified by that. And to me, being a writer is like, you're peeling away and trying to find that core mystery inside of yourself. And for me, it was just like trying to figure out why the hell everybody seems so, it's like, depressed or sad, or where's this heaviness come from? And
where does it come from? Do you know? Did you ever find out?
I mean, I think when you go back far enough, I think every family has skeletons in the closet, and like I remember my aunt died when I was 5 of skin cancer, but nobody was talking about that. I think it's just a bunch of people aren't comfortable with death, and talking about loss, and in general in our culture, I think we don't know what to do with death. We don't look at it. And so I think people just bottle it away. They especially don't know how to talk about kids about death. So I think I just like inherited the heaviness without the explanation of why the heaviness was there. And then, I spend the rest of my life trying to make people laugh while I try to figure out what that is, but that's, as much as we're bad at death, I would almost distrust a culture that was really good at it. Like I feel like we're not supposed to understand death. It's supposed to be mysterious, and it's supposed to be a little like it's supposed to be heavy, right? Like it's what shocks when memento mori or whatever the expression is, like remember death. Like we're supposed to be occasionally confronted with our mortality in a way that sort of shocks us out of the moment, and we're like, oh shit, yeah, I need to like appreciate this. It could go away tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is in some ways like a driver of one's appreciation. And it raises the stakes, right? Like life without death, which might be coming. I mean, maybe we'll get to a point. I'm serious. I think the species is trying for that. These tech bros are obsessed with living forever. And like, who knows? Maybe with, advances in technology, there will be a time when people are living for thousands of years or something. But I think about like the sobriety related adage, like you're only as sick as your secrets. And
Mm.
I was like listening to you talk, and when you were talking about how you could sense as a kid that some shit was being unsaid in the room, like that's familiar to me. Like I think I have that feeling around almost everybody. And I can remember distinctly in college, like for some reason in particular, that was like the druggiest time of my life. And it really wasn't a very long period of time, but it was intense.
Hmm.
Like not only because it was intense, but because that time in life, I think, was just, like adolescence, and there's more emotional content, I think, to the human experience or something during that time. But I remember just constantly having this feeling that like there was a lot of shit that was going on subsurface, and I could
Hmm.
kind of sense it. Maybe that's the writerly, DNA in me. Just I had like an antenna for it. I could feel when people were carrying stuff but weren't saying it. And I remember reading this book by it's kind of a crackpot, I think, but it was called Radical Honesty.
Okay.
It was like some kind of shrink who was trying to build himself into kind of like a thought leader. You know what I'm saying? Like one of these
Hmm.
guys, and he wrote this book, and it was basically his entire agenda was that like you just had to be like unbelievably blunt and honest all the time. And he would run workshops, and everybody would have to be naked, which got a little weird. And I think that, but like just that idea was very appealing to me, where it was like, what if we were all just really telling the truth and there weren't any secrets? And then, I think about it from this vantage point as like a middle-aged dude and a parent. And I
Hmm.
think about my own kids being in a room with me and being like, what's dad not saying? you know? And, I try to be, I like to think I am as honest as I can be with my kids, but I also know there are times when I've been too honest. My,
Yeah.
my wife is like, reel it in. Like, come on, like they don't need to hear that. And I'm like, what? We're all human beings. And, it gets a little bit tricky. Like there's a balancing act, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that we're supposed to be radically honest about every little thought. Like we're supposed to have a filter, like
Yeah.
both for our own sake, for the people we love sake, and especially for kids, It's like we can baby step. I don't mean, I think there's a difference between lying and oversharing, you
But
should tell.
I like oversharers.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, sometimes I guess it can become annoying or problematic, but like I find being around blunt people who are good intentioned, if somebody's being cruel or something, like, and they are masquerading as like a really like radically honest person, that's not my thing. But I'm talking about people who are just kind of like open books,
Yeah.
and I kind of want more of that. I
Yeah, I
f-
think I think that's like the hardest thing in the world to do is to be like so in the moment that every time you're like saying something to someone, you're actually thinking about the words coming out of your mouth. Like instead of just giving if we all have like a script and we're just playing that out over and over again, but to actually like slow down and stop and say what you actually mean. I mean, I think that is like the heart of Buddhism, right? And I just like, David Lynch just died, and people were saying that about him, that they felt like he was somebody who's really in the moment at all times, and like that's like a huge part of the art he was making. And yeah, I think he was meditated every day. I think there's something there about the radical honesty that can come um, from just like actually saying what you think. And I think that's often shocking to people because people don't say what they're actually thinking, or get really vulnerable at a moment when you think we're supposed to be just bullshitting or something. And you're like, oh, fuck, yeah. And I think that's what good writing does, right? It just says what you can recognize yourself on the page because you're like, oh, I do that. I think that. I have those thoughts. And it's sort of shocking to experience that. It makes it feel less alone, I think. But it's really hard to do.
yeah, I feel like there's a vibration, like, not to get too like hippy dippy about it, but I feel like when I'm reading writing that has that kind of effect, it carries like a vibrational energy or something. And the same thing goes for being in a room with a person or in conversation with a person who's operating on that wavelength. Is that, oh, okay, so this person's really here. They aren't like running multiple conversations at once, like one with me, one that's going on in their head as like
Hmm.
background static, like worrying about how they look or how they sound or what's, on their to-do list. It's like somebody who's actually like really there,
Yeah.
and you recognize it when you see it or when you hear it.
Yeah, and I mean, our society's like rewards multitasking. We're supposed to be doing 17 things at a time, and like I think social media just makes that worse. The more
I
time we
fucking
spend on there, it's like it
I
just does
fucking
something
hate it.
bad.
I fucking hate it. Every day I hate it. And like yet I'm on it. I feel it's this whole I've been over this a million times, but I dream of just deleting it all and just never looking at it again. But I feel like I have to do it for this show because, people want to get the word out. And
Yeah, I mean, I think like I don't mind popping on there for 10 minutes, and I'll do my self promotion when I have a book coming out and click the retweets and all that stuff. But then like once it's just like the scrolling, I feel like the scrolling is bad. When it just starts serving you random little videos and content, I mean, it's just not, I don't think our brains are supposed to work that way. And I like when I go on airplanes now, I'm like amazed that people aren't watching movies. They're just like on TikTok, just
fuck
watching one
TikTok.
little like 10-second video after another. And I'm just like, this is not how brains are supposed to work. This is not doing anything good for anybody. But
Well, and what's the algorithm serving you on those short videos? Because that's kind of like I'm just like looking at animal attacks, people jumping off of like high things, like whether it's base jumpers or people jumping off of bridges into water, but it's like terrifying, or they're
yeah.
like standing on some skyscraper without any ropes, or they're doing parkour, like that shit. That shit comes to me, and then it's fitness models. I'm
Okay.
getting lots of girls. Like, it's kind of insidious. Like they know I'm a guy, they know my
Yeah.
age,
Mhm.
and they just want you to be on the platform.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, there's just like some girl like doing the splits and like smiling, and you're like, what the fuck? Like I didn't ask for this,
Yeah.
And then, what's the other thing? Oh, and then like animals in danger, like being rescued, like these puppy narratives where like they find this like trembling puppy like cowering under a car, and then they it's like this little mini video set to like really like emotional music about how they nurse it back to health, and then it becomes part of their family.
Yeah.
Like, what does that fucking say about me? I don't know. Nothing good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you go to that Instagram Discover page, it's like looking in your own mind of what you've clicked in the past. It's a little scary.
But how am I not supposed to click on? That's the whole point. Like some guy's falling off of a building, and I'm not supposed to watch. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
it's messing with your dopamine, and I don't know. I feel it feels very manipulative, and it kind of pisses me off, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
at the company, and
I
it's
mean,
just
the Instagram gets me with like, I click on that and it's just a bunch of live Nirvana videos, and I'm like, okay, but I'm gonna click. It knows that I'm tempted, like it knows my age. It knows I come from the grunge world, and that that's my weakness, I guess.
yeah. I get a lot of Jerry Garcia too for some
Okay.
reason. I'm obsessed. He's like, this is gonna really date me and make me seem weird, but he's like a hero of mine artistically, and so yeah,
Oh
like if
yeah.
there's like old videos or interviews or whatever, I'll get that, but. Yeah, it's fucked up, and I don't know what to do about it. Hopefully, it'll go away, or something better will come along. But I want to talk with you about your collection and just some of like the bigger picture things that I feel like it's communicating. It's obviously very funny, as we've been discussing, and the title itself kind of is an indicator that it's a lot about like men in love and in lust
Hmm.
and looking for connection in the world. It's also a lot about drugs and the ways in which people medicate themselves to try to, I guess, like anesthetize themselves against feeling like uncomfortable feelings, and maybe to, in particular, anesthetize themselves against the fear that often accompanies real connection and
Yeah.
like real vulnerability, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think most of my protagonists are like just an extreme version of how I see myself, which is that like I think I wrote this into one of my stories. I can't remember if it's in here or not, but like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, he's an old soul. He's been here many times," and I'm like, "No, this is my first time on Earth, and I don't understand anything."
I've
And
said that too. I've said that
yeah,
too. Why does everybody have to be an old soul? It's so
yeah.
self-congratulatory in a way.
And so I think, yeah, I think these protagonists feel like they're just walking around, nothing makes sense, but they desperately want like to connect with people in a world that feels absurd. So how do you like meet people? And they're always just like, I think I'm fairly impulsive-ish, but I like check myself quite a bit. I have this, I have this theory that like I grew up with cats, and supposedly like toxoplasmosis like makes you more of a risk taker. And I'm always like, I think I definitely have that,
What is it? Cats give you that?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose like it's in cat feces, and you just like inhale it, and then you become a bigger risk taker. Like there's like theories that like every artist in history has had toxoplasmosis from cats. I don't know if this is true, but like, but then I want my characters to be like, what's that next level of just like really taking ridiculous leaps, even more than the ones I'm too fearful to take. And I just because I think it's always interesting to be like revisit my life and then make it more of something, just push it a little bit further. And that's to me where like things reveal themselves on the page that feel interesting to me. But
Yeah, you're kind of like clowning on yourself a little bit, but it's useful creatively. And I think it's like a good way into funny, maybe, to kind of like, it's like funhouse mirror versions of Kevin Maloney, where you get to play with like the frequency knobs or whatever, you get to turn things up and exaggerate other things, make some things smaller and some things bigger. And I don't know, that can lead to comedy, right?
yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, I think to some degree, like every work of art is autofiction because you're just dipping into the well of yourself and your life and your history and pulling things out. And whether you put that in outer space or you just write it real close to something that happened, we're all just going into our experiences and mining the stuff that feels potent, right? Like, and then we all like, and then you're just turning knobs at whatever point to distort it or put it into a different character. And I think that's where interesting stuff happens. Because if it's totally removed from your life, then you're probably not writing your story. You're just imitating what you think a book is supposed to be. But I think once you just start mining your own life for content, that's when like things start getting interesting on the page. But
Yeah, well, yeah, this whole argument drives me up the wall. I don't think there's any rules. That's kind of like my full stop feeling on the matter. Whatever you want to write it. There's no rules. There's room for everything. Go write your like fantasy fiction that feels like it's taking place on another planet or whatever, or write your like bare bones auto fiction that might as well have just been lifted whole cloth from your life. Like in either case, to me, it's auto fiction.
mm-hmm.
Like if you really dig down deep enough and you start to peel away the layers or whatever. But what I think I like the most, or what like I often feel I should say, like this is less of an aesthetic issue and more of an emotional issue, where I'm like, just give me like, I call them the nudists, like the people who are just like, okay, we're going to die. Like, I'm not going to make any money on this probably. What the fuck do I have to lose? Like, here I am. Like this, you know what I'm saying? There's like a fearlessness in the work and it's like unadorned and it's very personal and it's kind of like oversharing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think because those are the universal things, right? I think we live in a world that, going back to social media, like our jobs every day when we wake up to some extent is to distract ourselves. Like that's what happens from the moment we wake up. And the nudists are just like, yeah, they're just like, we're all going to die. None of this maybe means anything, and yeah, I think we all just want to be like, as much as we want to distract ourselves, I think when we go to art, we want art to do something different. We want art to do maybe what like religion does or what drugs do, which is not like prevent us from staying distracted. We want to be lifted out of our distracted mind. Like we want that thing, we're scrolling on TikTok and then suddenly we want to feel like our phone just dropped and we looked up and saw a rainbow or something, like something happened that's so different than this very like controlled, distracted world we live in. And I think that's, at least for me, I think that's what good art does. It yanks us out of ourselves and points to God, at least that's what I want my art to do. And I don't even know what
high bar.
Yeah, I don't know. And somebody might just be like, wait, what? And you write about like, 40-year-old guys doing drugs at a party. And I'm like, yeah, but like God can be anywhere, right? Like,
God is everything, right? If not everything, then what,
And I think I'm just really interested in what snaps the average person out of what yanks them out of their world for even just a second, where we catch like a glimpse of the infinite. Like what does that? And I think it could be drugs sometimes. I think it could be loss. I think it could be death, and usually we don't stay mindful for very long, like there's like I think it's like, well, it's one of the Suzuki's, Shunru Suzuki or something, who was like, he said something like, we basically everyone knows what enlightenment is. Like everybody's been enlightened, but you've been enlightened for 4 seconds and then you got distracted and then you weren't enlightened anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I think the idea that it's like this permanent state, I think, which I guess is in Buddhism, the idea that there are people who just, it clicked and then they just stayed there forever. But I think the rest of us, we get in these little moments. And I think those are great stories, like what got someone there for a second. And then of course it's the most human thing in the world to then just like go back to TikTok, even after you see God, you're like, okay. And then you just like dive back in.
Yeah. I've got to watch this video of a fitness model, doing a handstand. But, I think like the whole like Buddhist thing and thinking about like awareness of the present moment or mindfulness, the opposite of that. And we all like experience that, whether we're, into Buddhism or not, the opposite of it is forgetfulness. Mm-hmm. It's that falling back into the static.
Yeah.
And it happens over and over and over again. And you go into like that zombie trance where you're not even aware of what the hell's going on, or you're just on your phone and you're diving into a bunch of crap. And then you come out of it and you're like, ugh, like I feel kind of gross.
Yeah.
I'm kind of anguished and sad and angry. I hate humanity. Like I fucking hate the effect that it has.
Yeah.
And even like, this loss of David Lynch, he dies. And I was texting with a friend when he died. And the first thing I said was, social media is going to be insufferable. And she was like, well, I hope that he gets the best send off ever. He deserves it. She's like a huge David Lynch fan. And like, I like David Lynch. I got no problem with him at all. And I have a lot of reverence for him. And I love the fact that he was able to get his weird vision into like the mass media machine somehow. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a business achievement that I find so impressive. Like he was able to fully be himself and be so odd and like sort of resolutely quote unquote uncommercial. And yet it had some commercial success and he kind of wriggled through the system. And I think that's what people are cheering for,
Yeah.
I get that. And the thing about it though, for me is that I don't trust the expressions of grief from the rank and file. And I even kind of don't trust them from the various celebrities who like, cause I'm like, this is a performance of grief for an audience and people want to be associated with him because they think he's cool and they want to be like, yeah, he was the king of the nerds. He was a cool nerd and I loved him and he changed my life because I'm a cool nerd too. And like, yeah. I don't know, man. Like, am I just being a dick? Cause like, I then read a tweet later in the day, or not a tweet, but whatever you call a blue sky. And it was really funny. Like some guy, like, what did he say? Cause I had this like tantrum or whatever, where I was like, I don't trust it. I'm being cynical. I know, but I don't trust the performances of grief. And then this guy is like, live your life so that when you die, some joyless schmuck is annoyed that his entire social media feed is a wall of people talking about how much you and your work meant to them. And so I was like, guess that means I'm the joyless schmuck.
Yeah. I mean, my experience half the time when someone dies, especially if they're like in their 80s and there's an outpouring of grief. Not with David Lynch. I knew David Lynch was alive, but half the time I'm like, I didn't even know that person was still alive, you know, like, but suddenly we're all like mourning their loss, and I just think so much of social media. I mean, it is the nature of it is performative. We're all like, portraying some image we think people want to see of who we idealize ourselves to be, which I think can be useful. I mean, that's what life is too, to some extent. We're all trying on these faces.
We're acting.
But it's maybe like the worst version of that. And the fact that it gets immediately rewarded, like with these ups or downs, it's just, I think it's fascinating and dark. It's like my I'm also really into reality TV, which I think is the same thing. It's just like, I know this isn't good, but there's some part of my brain that is just like,
like the lizard brain. It's just like, yes. They know it too. They know it.
Yeah. I heard that Werner Herzog is really into reality TV. I read that and I'm like, okay, it's not just me. Like there's like a great artist out there who is also just like, this shit is fascinating.
Wait till he dies. All the nihilists will be he understood me. He understood the darkness within me. I don't know, man. I can't do it. I couldn't put I love David Lynch as much as the next person. I really admire his hair. Like that. It's the best hair I've ever seen in my life. Everyone loves that hair, It's just, there's something cool about him, and he managed to like make it all work in a very like twisted, you know, capitalist system that is the entertainment business. But I couldn't bring myself to like post a photo and be like, you know, I don't know, I can't do that. I can't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It feels not authentic to me, you know, but you know, if people then go out and watch a lot of David Lynch movies, I guess there's worse things in the world to be spending your time doing, you know?
Yeah,
And
for sure, for
yeah.
sure. So you know, it's like thinking about ways to be and like ways to communicate in the world, both like online, in person, or on the page. And this idea that we were talking about earlier with regard to Buddhist, like present moment awareness and kind of being with people who are vibrating at that frequency or reading their work. And it feels like it has that energy kind of like embedded into the text. Like a question that arises for me around this, and I want to hear like what you think of it, is like trying to channel that energy and to be that like live minded and aware and like kind of open, but also not somebody who's like insufferable. Like, you know, cause like it's a fine line. That's the
Yeah.
thing, because like in Buddhism, just to kind of like use that kind of paradigm, they call it mindful speech, right?
Mhm.
Where you're very conscious of the impact of what you're saying and whether or not it's helpful to people or it's like life affirming or positive for people, or if like what you're saying is like giving off this like negative charge that makes people feel like embittered or angry or, you know, depressed, or because people do that. It's contagious, right? When
Yeah.
people are like transferring negative energy. And the same thing goes with listening. There's like mindful listening where you're like really there for somebody and you're trying to, like, we're trying to do that right now,
Yeah.
you know? But do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like trying to kind of like walk that line between being awake and tuned in to what's happening right now and communicating as such, but not wanting to like overdo it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone to some like Buddhist meditation centers and been part of retreats and stuff. And sometimes I'm like, this is the most insufferable people I've ever met. You know, like it doesn't always attract like, you know, wonderful people. But I think I don't know. I think because if you make it your whole brand to be someone who's like being in the moment and actively listening, like my fiance and I went to this like event and we saw these people that looked like they just came from a rainbow gathering and they were giving each other these hugs that lasted like, you know, like 10 minutes. And we
Oh
were just
God.
like, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Too much.
it's too much. And I think so. I think sometimes when people, their motivations are coming from the right place, but I think we can, you know, like when I find my people in this world, it's usually I'm like really drawn to other like other creators, artists, musicians, and you would talk to them, you feel like you're in the presence of someone who's very thoughtful, but they're not just like being like kind of like over. I think it becomes performative, right? Like mindfulness becomes performative if you like if your intentions are um you know, like you start from a good place and then like anything else it becomes fake. So I think the hardest thing is to like keep shedding away all the pretenses and just try to be an interesting person and read good books and be thoughtful, which I think you have to do to be a successful artist. And then when you meet those people out in the world, you're like, oh yeah, like immediately you just like get a sense like this is someone who's smart, they're gonna have something interesting to say, they're gonna be surprising. And it's not because they're trying to do those things because it's Buddhist, they're just trying to, you know, I think they're just thoughtful people who are curious about life. And I think you find that in all, you know, parts of like, I watch cooking shows and you'll see the great chefs, they'll just stop what they're doing and they have curiosity about what's happening in front of them. If they see like someone pulls out an ingredient they've never seen before, they're like, what's that? And I'm like, yeah, that's curiosity. That's why you're a great chef. It's like,
Yeah.
we're willing to stop.
And also probably why you're interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so. Yeah, I think people become insufferable when they're trying too hard to be their idea of what an enlightened person looks like, because that's nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But if you're a curious person, just because you're like a creator and you make things and you want to get better at it and you're open, that's really the heart of that thing, that beginner's mind, you know, like, but it's just trying to be an artist and not suck, really.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like, yeah, the people, I always think about the eye contact. I remember going to like yoga classes in the past, and there's always that person who just like is really looking at you. They know it. They're like, I'm aware. And you're just like, okay, we get it. We get
Yeah.
it. We get that you're aware. It's too much. And
You're a little more aware, you know how creepy you are, you know?
yeah, exactly. But they're just trying their best, I guess. But it's a lot. And I want to ask you about like relationships. I know you just mentioned your fiance. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've been seeing, I know you guys didn't you guys just get engaged? Like, I think I saw it on Instagram.
Yeah, we just went down to Costa Rica and got engaged, and felt like just a beautiful place. I'm like, when are we going to be back here? So yeah.
Where in Costa Rica? Can I know?
Gosh, it was. I just Googled like beautiful places on the beach in Costa Rica. I don't know anything about it. And the first Tamarindo, that's what it was called.
Oh yeah, that's like the surf spot. I know.
Yeah,
I know Tamarindo just because of the endless summer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I literally knew nothing other than that it was like I had airline miles. It was near the airport, and it said it had good beaches, and so we just wanted to have an experience of like. I'm always like when I travel, I try to cram everything in, and for the first time, I actually just went on a trip, and the whole plan was like be in a swimming pool and drinking pina coladas at 11 a.m.
And propose.
And propose, yeah.
Good for you. And it was good because I've never been to Costa Rica. I want to go, but
it was great. Yeah, I mean, it's like you just can't beat the weather. And then all of a sudden, there's like an iguana right there next to the swimming pool, and we didn't do any of that. Like I said, we weren't going into the jungle to see sloths. It literally was like a vacation about just chilling the fuck out, that's what I needed. So
like a revolutionary concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it was actually try to just relax.
Yeah. It was amazing.
As opposed to like going on a trip and then coming home and feeling like you need a trip to like recover from the trip.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, because this story collection, there's a lot of like, what do we call them? Misconnections.
Yeah.
And like a lot of lusting and a lot of like, oh God, I'm a middle-aged guy at like kind of the college party, or like the people in their 20s party, and like these age disparities. And like, I think it's like the experience of being a single dude getting older, which I have not been, but I have friends who kind of are going through that. And I'm thinking of one friend in particular who is like fun-loving guy, likes to go out, likes to dance even, which is a little bit of a mystery to me. But I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you do with that? At a certain point, because you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be like the guy at the club who's 50 and everyone's like, okay, stay away. All the girls are sort of like texting each other like, hey, heads up.
Yeah. I mean, I had that experience last summer where I was like, I was suddenly, out in the world as a single person again, or I guess this was like in the spring, and I like went to a rock and roll show, and I'm 48, and this like it was everybody was in like their late 20s, and this one guy was like, "Are you famous?" And I think like you just couldn't imagine why some guy with a gray beard was at this rock and roll show, unless I was like an aging grunge guitarist or something,
I think I read this in the there's a piece you wrote with your fiance for I forget the name of the
Icebreakers.
Icebreakers, yeah. So
yeah, that was straight out of reality. That happened, and but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've been unlucky in love historically, and that actually makes for like the one consolation you get out of like life falling apart all the time is that you get good art out of it, and now that like my partner Ryan Ashley is like, we get along so well, and I'm like, this might be sabotage, like I don't know how to write about being happy.
Yeah, you just fucked your career up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
gotta so lots of relationships have not gone your way. Is that like basically the theme previously?
Yeah, I mean, this will be my third marriage, so I guess I'm in an elite club now.
third time's a charm.
Yeah, that's the plan anyway. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I think I've picked relationships that felt like sort of sparkly without thinking much about it, and then life goes sideways, and it's but I think that's why the characters I write about are just even more extreme versions of that, where they're just impulsive and they're like, oh, this looks interesting, I'm going to jump into that. And And I think it's the most relatable. Like, I do think it's hard to write about being happy. Like, I think when relationships fall apart or they're broken, and people can identify with that. Because even if you're in a happy relationship, there's parts of it that aren't working well. But who writes about being happy? I don't know how to do that. You know?
Yeah, no, it's not the stuff of literature, that's for sure. Or for that matter, music. Though I guess like maybe there are love songs that are like celebrations, but
Yeah.
I don't know how many of those. I think there's fewer of those that are classics than the ones that are about the broken heart. I mean, that's really the bread and butter of the whole thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. But I also think maybe this is like the challenge for this next phase of my life is because originally I wrote stories and books where the characters had to do drugs to make the world feel like alive and vibrant and strange and funny. And then I was like, okay, how do I write a story that feels that way where nobody does any drugs, right? But often there's still just like crazy shit's happening, they're sad. And now I'm like, okay, how do I write a story where the themes of humanity are there, life feels alive and vibrant, and the characters are doing pretty well? Like that's like the task I've got in front of me. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off, but
Yeah, I mean, let me know. I'll be curious to hear. But it's interesting hearing you say that about drugs and how it kind of like is a way to like reframe reality, right? I mean, I think that's what people are looking for, at least in part, and maybe in particular initially. And then, as time goes on, it's like, yeah, these feelings sure feel inconvenient. Wouldn't be too bad to just medicate those, snuff those out at least for a few hours. But
yeah.
I have a complicated relationship with that whole thing. Like, I'm not really much of a drinker anymore. Just because like I don't react well to it. Like it fucks with my sleep and I get hangovers too easily. I'm just like, I missed it. It's over.
Yeah.
Or I didn't miss it, but it missed me at this point, But I've been trying to take like low dose gummies, like very low dose, like micro dose THC essentially.
Yeah.
Like thinking like I did it over the holidays just because the holidays give me a headache. And I'm like, okay, this will make me less of a dick as like I endure this disruption to my routines. It's just me clinging to my routines. But then I get, the thing is like, this might be the Catholic in me, my lingering Catholic guilt or something, but I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, this is like Dumbo's feather. Like, I can fly without this. Why do I need this? And like, am I somehow betraying my responsibilities as a father by taking 1 milligram of THC? And then David Lynch will die and I'll be like, see, he was a chain smoker, but he was also a meditator. He didn't seem bothered by it. Like maybe I'm just too uptight. You see what I'm saying? Like I get into that whole spiral.
Yeah. I think like, I guess I feel that way about psychedelics where I'm like, I don't know that you need to open that door every day, like, I mean, I know microdosing is all the rage, but like, I feel like you open that door just often enough that it sort of snaps you back into that sort of like really alert mindset. But then it's all about what do you do the next day? And I think
how do you integrate it?
How do you integrate it? How do you make art about it? How do you try to be a more thoughtful person, having learned those lessons? And because the drug isn't the thing. The drug is just sort of like. It's just that same. It's remember death. That's all it's doing. It's remembering that you're alive and that you're going to die one day, deeply, profoundly in your body, and maybe in a way that sort of spooks you. And it's not always great, but it
feels palpably real. Like I think a high enough dose of a psychedelic, I feel like the trip almost always like climaxes with you dying.
Yeah.
Like that, you hear that over and over. I mean, and people are like, oh, people at home are like, okay, not for me. But actually, I think it's good.
Yeah.
If you can withstand it. And then, I think I remember reading that book by Michael Pollan, and I want to say there's some kind of like neurological investigation of psychedelics that confirms that like when you take psychedelics, they basically like wipe your hard drive, like in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like defrag. Remember when you had to defrag your computer back in the day?
Yeah.
It's like defragging your mindset. So it's kind of like cleaning the slate, but not like, it's not like wiping away your memories or anything. It's just kind of clearing out some space, basically. And I'm with you though, because I remember there was this period where I feel like psychedelics really came back into vogue in like a pop culture-y way. Like, I don't know, 7 or 8, 9, 10 years ago. maybe right around when Michael Pollan published that book.
Yeah, yeah.
And microdosing of psilocybin became fashionable because it was like, this is the key. Like all the people coding in Silicon Valley are using this and having breakthroughs and creative, it gives you a creative spark and all this stuff. So I did it. I was like, okay, like, cause I'm very susceptible to those sorts of trends. Like, I was laughing with a friend of mine because I was like, yeah, I really don't drink anymore. And, or who was I talking to? Maybe somebody for the show, but it was like, yeah, I just read these studies that came out where they're like, even one drink is bad for your health.
Yeah.
That affects me. And then this person I was talking to was like, yeah, remember when it was like one glass of red wine a day was like good for your heart? And I was like, yes. And you know what I did? I drank red wine every fucking day. I'm the biggest sucker going. I'm like, I'm such a sucker for all this stuff. But anyway, I did microdose psilocybin, but the way that I'm wired, I'm very sensitive. Like very sensitive. Like the smallest doses of things, I can feel them. Like my system is tuned into that. And so I think I've told this story once or twice, but the funniest thing happened where back in the day when I was doing in-person interviews for this show, people would come to my house. I was interviewing Sam Lipsyte, and I took my psilocybin microdose at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I think I forgot to take it in the morning, but then I think I took a little bit too much or like a little bit more. And I'm sitting there interviewing him, like sitting across the table from him and starting to be like, can he tell that I'm fucked up? Like it got into that.
Yeah.
And like, I was truly like trying to like listen to him. It's no way to interview somebody basically, but I had to like kind of white knuckle it through the interview. And when he left, I was sure that he thought like I was a freak, I was like, and I ended up writing him an email afterwards, like, dear Sam, I know this is going to sound strange. I microdosed psilocybin and I think I might have taken a little bit too much. So if I seemed odd, and he like just laughed and like wrote me back. It was like, it's fine, bro. I thought it was, I thought you were great.
See, now I want to go back and listen to that interview knowing this.
I mean, truly, like there was like, I was perspiring a little, because then I was like holding onto the table, just like, holy cow. Like, I hope I don't fully start tripping,
Yeah. He seems like a safe author to be tripping with. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it was intimidating. But,
I mean, it was intimidating to talk to him a little bit. I'm always intimidated to talk to anybody, but it was it was a safe space that he made for me as a guest. But yeah, man, it's hard. It's hard to know what the right exact answers are. I think the Buddhist thing that sort of haunts me is that like any toxin just darkens the mind. I read that somewhere once and I was like, oh fuck. Like, I guess I should just do nothing and, no Dumbo's feather, just fly with whatever I got.
Yeah, I mean that's probably what we all should be doing. But like this world's a tough place to get from the more like we live in a really like things are rough out there too.
Well, it's like this is the other thing is like I'm not living on a monastery. In some like bucolic like pastoral setting where it's like totally silent and there's really not much to do except meditate and like do walking meditation and chant and stuff. Like I'm in the world.
Yeah,
like I'm in LA. It's like I don't even know if the air is safe to breathe. Like. Shit is fucked up. And like, I remember reading an interview with Seth Rogen, who is like the uber stoner, like in popular culture. He's like Willie Nelson, Snoop, and like Seth Rogen, they're like the guys, but they make it look good, right? They're like, oh yeah. And it's all about, and he was just like, yeah, I smoke weed all the time, unapologetically. And he's like, to me, it's just like wearing shoes. like you're not going to go barefoot through the world because there's like shit on the ground and like glass is broken. You could cut your feet and you put shoes on. He's like, for me, it's just like putting shoes on. That kind of makes sense. Like if you have to live in the world of what do you call it? What do the Buddhists call it? Like the lay people or whatever it is, the laity. You're not kind of removed. I think if you take 1 milligram of THC like a day. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, whatever, I don't know. To some extent, whatever people got to do. Yeah. I mean, like, LA was just is probably still on fire. I don't know how on fire LA is. Like, we're moving into a second Trump presidency. I walk out my door. I live in like downtown Portland now. I walk out my door. There's like, a real homelessness issue. There's, heroin needles on the ground. Like the world is like, but the world is also wildly beautiful too, but if we want to keep our eyes wide open, it also means all the bad shit gets in too, so I don't know. I don't know how to strike that balance between, you don't want to put your head in the sand and ignore what's happening politically in this country. But you also don't want to only think about those things and just drive yourself into a depression. And
I got to say, like, I know things will change. I'm not like in some fixed position permanently, but I haven't watched 1 second of news since election day. Not one. Now it's January.
Yeah.
I got no plans to. There's something about what has happened in this country that has broken something in me where I'm like, fuck it. Like, this country sucks. And like these people like who are voting for this, like, fuck off. I don't want anything to do with any of it. But
yeah, I guess that's another way of wearing shoes, right? Just
I mean, I also think though, because like the election years, especially in recent history, have been so intense, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually in this country. The stakes have been so high. The rhetoric and the propagandizing has been so crazy and toxic that I think it's totally justifiable to take a long break and to like sort of let your wounds heal a little bit and to let your energy reserves kind of refill. I'm happy to engage in a proactive way and like resist in some proactive way should it come to pass. But like watching the play-by-play the way that I used to, like trying to keep up with the news cycle, I'm fucking done. I'm not doing it. It's not, I don't even know if it helps,
Yeah. And I think maybe where I've changed, I used to think the only way to protest was to actually go outside and wave a sign and protest. And now I'm like, I think the ultimate protest is to just try to live a thoughtful, curious life. I think that's so different than what, people are on their phones, the algorithms pushing people to extremes and people aren't thinking for themselves anymore. And they're just angry and it's seething. And I think to try to be someone who's like, okay, I'm going to try to make my brain I'm going to try to live a different life, even if that just means writing my silly short stories where some guy does drugs. But if I'm really trying to be thoughtful and curious and ask questions before I make assumptions, like that can be a revolutionary act. And because I think if everybody was asking questions rather than being absolutely certain about whatever their position is, we would live in a very different world, And if people were more open, we would live in a very different world, and they weren't so controlling and scared and repressed and all that shit. So I don't know. I think revolution can look like a lot of things, and at least that's what I tell myself. Because maybe it's exhausting to do the other,
There's worse things to tell yourself.
Yeah.
I feel like trying to embody the kind of person, the kind of like way of life that you would most like to see. It's like be the change you want to see. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's also like you have to resist because these forces are really insidious and toxic. They're hard to avoid on purpose. They're addictive on purpose. I'm talking about like whatever lives on your phone. Like this is to me like the sort of the nexus of it all, because I see it over and over again. I've seen really good friends of mine become toxified by the algorithm, and you start watching these video shorts and the dopamine hit that it gives you. Suddenly you're pissed off and like, aggrieved, and you hate everything. And you're particularly angry about some issue. And I'm like, dude, really? Like all of a sudden, like immigration is bothering you? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I get that there are human problems or challenges to be dealt with. It's not like there's nothing there, but I just think sometimes people get whipped up into a frenzy and they don't even realize it. I think there's a sophistication to the propaganda, I guess is what I'm saying, that you have to really guard yourself against.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a reason all these companies are owned by billionaires, because they're really good at getting people to be mad at about everything else, other than the fact that they keep taking all the money,
That's right. Their business model is so fucking ingenious, and it's like, it's evil. And they're just like, we'll get them addicted. They'll have no choice. Their entire work lives will be tied to these devices, which means that we've got them where we want them. I just can see like the calculus, and it's hard for me to even quantify my loathing for these fucking tech oligarchs.
Yeah.
Like, is there any one of them who's like a guy that you would actually want to hang out with? They all seem like so horrible to me.
They're the worst. Yeah. And that's why when you were like microdosing was taking over like the tech bro coding community, I was like, can't we just have one thing that's not about capitalism?
That's what I mean. They're like, we're going to get an edge. And like, if I'm being honest, I was like, oh shit, like maybe this is the thing that'll lead to some great breakthrough, but I don't know. It's, Yeah, it's like the co-opting of like psychedelics, the co-opting of even Buddhism. Like I was watching like Sam Altman is doing like a Q&A with like Jack Kornfield in Silicon Valley. And
Oh
I'm
man.
just like, because I think Jack Kornfield's like a sweetheart. I don't think he's a problematic human or anything, but I'm just like, be careful, Jack. Like these bastards, they're sneaky, they're smart, and
Yeah,
like they're
yeah.
gonna, but I don't like the idea of like, yeah, like Google, like what was the motto of Google? It's like,
Do no evil or
don't be
something.
evil.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they have like Buddhist monks like coming in to give like speeches to the employee base, but it's all horse shit. I don't
I
think
feel
they're.
like now that like us Gen X, I'm like a young Gen Xer. I think you're probably the same. Like I feel like the wisdom that we have to bring to the next generation is like just like saying the word like all the grunge musicians hated capitalism and there was like the whole don't sell out thing. But now like I feel like there's a whole generation that their world has been served to them through their phone. And I don't think they see the lines as easily just because it's so also they've gotten so good about integrating selling you something and cool shit. And I think like the wisdom we have as the elders now is to be like, be wary of fucking all forms of capitalism. Be wary of your phone. Be wary of all this stuff. Somebody owns that, and fuck that. Like there's like a radical way of living that rejects all form of power congregated in capitalism. That's scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I feel like people. This is maybe part of my discomfort because I'm maybe a year older than you. I'm
Yeah.
75 was when I was born. Right? What
Yeah,
year were
yeah,
you
yeah.
born? Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant you are 75 years old.
I know. I'm 70. I'm
Yeah.
75 on the inside.
Yeah, I'm
But
1976. Yeah, so we're at the
yeah,
same.
so we're contemporaries. But I feel like part of what is so unnatural to me. Well, I mean, and it's that, but it's also like I don't like when I feel myself doing it. It's not like I'm totally above it or immune from it, but it's this performing yourself online.
Yeah.
And I think for people who grew up online, there's nothing more natural than performing yourself online. It's like the water. It's like a fish not being aware of the water that they swim in. That's just,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't know how to unfuck that.
Yeah.
I won't let my kids have social media. I say that, and like my son is like addicted to YouTube, and my daughter's watching like every show on Netflix. So it's not like I'm a great parent, but I won't let her as a teenager be on Instagram or even Snapchat, which I guess is how the kids communicate, because I'm terrified of what it's going to do to her.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like, I'm trying to look out for her. I don't think it's good for people's mental health, especially like when your brain is just developing.
Yeah, and I think there is this thing that's starting to happen where where real life is to certain people is feeling like the other thing. Like real life is the weird thing you have to deal with just so you can get back online. Like I just read an article in the New York Times about this woman who's like dating Chat GPT or something like she has like a virtual boyfriend and it's like meeting all of her needs. And I'm like, this is where we're going, like our whole lives are just going to be robots, and I like, it seems like a bad short story that got written 50 years ago. And now we're like actually in that short story.
Well, no, I was just talking to, I do this pop culture series, like podcast, once a week with Mira Gonzalez,
Mm-hmm.
where we just talk back and forth about stupid pop culture stuff. And there was a story that I flagged that we talked about where this woman in France gave away $850,000 to an online scammer. She thought she was married to Brad Pitt.
I think I saw some of that. Yeah.
She's on Facebook.
Yeah.
And this scammer then poses as Brad Pitt's mom. And then eventually like Brad Pitt slides into her DMs. And it's like, next thing you know, it's like, I have cancer.
Yeah.
And he like, there's these like very obviously doctored photos of Brad Pitt, like in the hospital. And this woman who was married to like a wealthy guy or whatever, and had gotten a divorce and had gotten a settlement. She wires this dude $850,000 of all people.
God. Yeah, Brad needs it.
I mean, yeah. Well, apparently his money was tied up in his Angelina Jolie divorce.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was the justification. But it's like it's not quite the same thing as like having like a Chat GPT like AI robot in your ear who's like your only intimate. Which is, I think, that's where things are headed, right? Where people are just going to have a relationship with the digital voice in their ear, just like in that Spike Jonze movie. But I just think that, like, that's this Brad Pitt story is kind of emblematic of that, with like a large dollop of like just breathtaking human stupidity. Like, just holy shit. I don't know how you get there. Like, how can you be like a sentient, like reasonably intelligent human being
Oh,
and find yourself wiring somebody? Like, you're married to the guy and you only met him on Facebook, or you're engaged and you never even talked to him.
yeah.
I don't get it.
And I think I think, and maybe that's why I feel like, writing a short story collection, like so few, I feel like it's sad, but like, I feel like reading a book is just like a wild act in this world, like, because everything else is about 10 seconds of your time, scrolling all this stuff, and to slow down and to read a book forces you to like be in someone else's brain for a few days at least. And it feels like an antiquated form of art in that way almost. And it's like, especially if you like, books are still most people like reading print books, and it just feels very old school in a world that's trending drastically in the other direction. And like, I'm sure my publishers would love it if, like, I think sales are important, but I think recognizing that, like, okay, that's not the only, like, I want to sell enough books so that people will keep publishing my books in the future. But I think so many young people, like, it's just all about follower counts and the way you can monetize that and becoming an influencer. And they've like lost track with what even the message is. It's just all about getting the followers, and you'll figure it out from there. And I think, I don't know. I think trying to make art and recognizing we live in a capitalist world, so you have to sell your books to keep on making that art, but also not having that be the prevailing goal, not having like follower counts be the primary goal, not having how much money you made on the book be the primary goal, but to just try to make really good art that you deeply believe in. I think it's kind of a radical thing in this world that's commodifying everything,
Yeah. And it's like trying to, get follower counts and all that kind of stuff. It's not even necessarily going to make books sell like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of the biggest like dark trick of the whole thing. You think if you have like 1 million people following you on Instagram that suddenly you're going to become a best-selling author. It's not really how it works. Like, oftentimes there's no correlation.
Yeah.
And I just think too, like, if you're sitting down to write, loaded up with all of that stuff, and it can be hard not to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many books are going to sell? Is there going to be an audience? I mean, that's kind of natural human thought processes, but it's going to fuck up your creative process. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to color the work in some way that's not good. You're not going to write your best stuff if you're too loaded up with that.
Yeah. And that's like, this is a question I have with like friends, is just like, is that an old school way of thinking about art, that, that like it should be pure, but that it should be untainted by capitalism. I don't know. Like, I think that's
I'm with you.
Something I think about all the time.
We're just two grumpy old men.
Exactly.
But I think like maybe the real litmus, like you can sort of, so if somebody's listening and they're like Gen Z and they're like, who are these fucking old guys? Just try this out. Spend like an hour swiping videos on Instagram or just scrolling on Instagram. Spend an hour, go for it. Like, indulge yourself, watch every, like semi-porny and like titillating, like violent video that you can possibly ingest for an hour, and then read a book for an hour. Notice how you feel after one versus the other. Like, to me, that's the whole shooting match. Like, when I read a book and if I actually sit down and read for an hour, I don't feel that garbagey feeling afterwards.
Yeah.
Even if the book isn't great. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just something, I think, fundamentally nourishing about that activity, which is an active, imaginative, emotional, even spiritual, like, creative activity. Like, it's not a passive activity like sitting slack-jawed in front of a TV or swiping. You know what I'm saying? It requires something of you.
Well, reading is almost, it's not that different than meditating, right? Because when you're meditating, when you catch your brain going off on some discursive, anxious thought about what you're going to do an hour from now, like, the goal is just to catch yourself and bring yourself back and just, not think about that thing, And similarly, if you're reading a book and you follow an anxious thought, you lose track of what's happening on the page. You have to reorient yourself. And whereas, like, I think social media and, rewards getting distracted. It's like the whole thing is about distraction. It's all about tangential thoughts and nonlinear thoughts and just following every little thing as far as it'll go. Whereas reading a book, you're just in one person's brain, and you're just staying put in that person's brain as they're telling you how they see the world, which is, I mean, it's kind of a spiritual thing, you know. It's like reading a book, I think is like a spiritual act in some ways, especially if it's a really good book that's someone's being really like candid about their life experience. I think that's like a wonderful thing in a way that just social media never will be. You know?
I think writing is the same way, though. You know, it's like writing, it requires the same level of concentration and presence of mind and it kind of being there, you know, in order for it to be done well. And it can be very easy. Like, you know, these people who will use these software programs that basically foreclose on the possibility of checking social media or going online while you're writing. What do they call it? I've never used it, but you know what I'm talking.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't used it.
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, when the work is going well, and when, just to kind of circle back, like when like you're reading a book and you feel like the language just has that vitality and like that energy sort of coursing through it, kind of like an electricity through a wire or something. I like to think it's because the book was either written or edited or some combination of the two, with the writer in that state of like full engagement and like full attention, as close to full attention as possible. And that brings up like interesting process questions around how you got Horse Girl Fever on the page, because I want to say I read that you're one of the, you know, you're a writer who kind of just lets yourself go on the initial draft. You're not somebody who sits there and agonizes over every word. You kind of just try to turn off the critical Kevin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's short stories in particular. I think with a novel, it's a little trickier, but I'll usually just have like not even a thought half the time. Sometimes I'm just like, I want to sit down and write and see what happens. And you do that enough days in a row. And I think I'm just looking for a nugget of something that feels compelling. And I don't know what that's going to be from one story to the next. And you know, this collection, I feel like, is just me going through, you know, over 10 years worth of stories and trying to pick the ones where it felt like I found something in the story. Like, you know, it's always a surprise. I can't I don't think you can. I've talked about this with some writer friends, and they're all like, oh, I have a story and it's 90% done and it flows and technically it's good, but it hasn't, like, I haven't found anything. Like nothing surprised me yet. And like, what do I do? And I think like sometimes the story just won't surprise you, and then it's not worth sharing to some extent. You know, it'll just always feel empty. But I think it's a story where you hit a moment and you were very in the moment as you were writing it, and you allowed something very surprising to happen because it came to you and you just went with it without overthinking it. And then when a reader reads that, they're going to have that same feeling you did when you discovered it writing it. And that's why I don't like, I never outline, because I just feel like if I outline, sometimes I'll have vague ideas of where I'm going, but I think just like working without a net, I know that like Flannery O'Connor worked that way. She's like, if I know what's going to happen, then I won't surprise myself and everybody else will be bored reading this. And I think there's something to that, writing as an act of discovery or trying to surprise yourself or trying to like learn something. And the stories in this collection are hopefully the ones that happened in, you know, for me.
Well, but I like this idea of just kind of like being, especially with the short story, just kind of letting it fly, putting words on the page, following things, surprising yourself, then maybe, you know, finishing the draft, putting it away, coming back to revisit it, and then seeing if there's something there. And I guess that's the question, is like, you're evaluating based on whether or not you feel surprised reading it. Like, how do you, just to drill down and make sure people are clear, like between the keepers and the ones that you like release back into the water, you know, like what's the evaluative process?
God, I mean, I think the biggest skill any artist can have is being able to admit when something that you made sucks, no matter how much time you put into it. Even if it was a novel you worked on for 7 years, there has to be a moment where you're like, this isn't working. And maybe it's not working because it's never going to work, or maybe just this one scene isn't working. But I think that when I'm reevaluating a story, I need to let some time pass, because sometimes when you finish a draft, you just feel the thrill of having finished something. But like getting away from it enough that when you reapproach it and you experience it, I think I just want to feel at some point that I'm kind of having like an out of body experience or something by something I made. Almost like it didn't feel like like I can feel how much I crafted of this, but here's this moment that felt like a gift, and I don't know where it came from. It doesn't feel like I wrote this because it's too interesting or strange, or like I uttered something that felt deeply true, but I couldn't have come up with it if I tried. Because I think sometimes when you write and you just keep on doing it, doing it, and doing it, I'm sure it's the way, like, you know, great songwriters, like I'm sure like Bob Dylan just strummed a chord sequence once and he's like, oh, I don't know where the fuck that came from, but that feels like it's always existed. The song was made to be written, and here I'm lucky enough to find it just because I sat down on my guitar enough days in a row.
Well, and he's like, yeah, like whenever I read about songwriters talking about their process, or like how, like the making of kind of narrative around like really well-known classic songs, it almost always happens fast.
Yeah.
And Bob Dylan, I want to say, you know, kind of refers to himself as like a vessel or like a channel. Like the song didn't come from him, it came through him. Like, not to get too precious about it, but like, I think that probably is right.
But I think like I think that the genius of those people is just, if you make art every single day, then it makes room for the good stuff to show up. You know, you can't, like, you're not going to have that aha brilliant moment if you're not sitting down working every day. But the more you do it, the more aha moments you have, I think. The more good art you make, just because you're putting yourself in, you know, with a fishing analogy, like you're not going to catch a fish unless you're standing there fishing. So you got to sit down and work every day. But like those gifts, I think, just come out of nowhere. And I think the ability to recognize them is just, it's sort of like, oh shit, this is something happened here. And I don't know what that is. Maybe, I think it is like, that's the spiritual part of writing. It's just those moments where something happened and you don't know why it works, but it just, some intuitive part of you is like, I don't know what happened here, but it feels different, you know?
And you got to get good at maybe recognizing that stuff when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, what about horse girls? Are they part of your Instagram algorithm? Are there lots of women on horses?
That's a great question. I mean, yeah, there are probably so many lost sales opportunities that I'm just like, you know, really should have leaned
Is that
harder.
a thing though? Is it like, are horse girls, like, are they a category of girls? Like, oh yeah, I love horse girls. Like girls who like horses.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like a type, and you know, I just had written this story. I write a lot about, you know, I wrote a story about like young people who were all kind of preoccupied with this one girl in school, and she was like a horse girl. She, you know, and the girl who's obsessed with horses. It's at least a type I had in my grade school. I assume every grade school has that horse girl, right? And,
like, I think it's definitely a type. Like, for young girls to be like into horses, that's a thing.
yeah,
I've had conversations with authors on this show, you know, who are telling me about this. But I guess my question is, like, is it a thing for guys to be into those girls specifically?
So what I think it's usually the opposite, right? Like I think usually they're like the nerdier outcast girls, and maybe like what this story is about is like recognizing that there's something deeply beautiful about those girls, because I think obsession is I think when someone is obsessed with something and they're pursuing it, even if it makes them look like a huge nerd, that's really compelling to me. Like, especially the older you get. As kids, I think people make fun of it because they're like, why is that person so obsessed with horses? Like, what's the deal? You know, that's weird.
Why does this guy keep making podcasts? I don't understand.
But then when you become an adult, everybody gets kind of boring. The people who are still obsessed with that one thing become artists, or they become, you know, like, yeah, why do you sit down and do this podcast over and over and over again? It's a strange thing. Why do I sit and write? You know, why do writers sit and do this thing over and over and over again, channel all this time and energy? And I don't know, but I think obsession makes people interesting, or makes them do interesting things.
What else are we going to do?
Yeah.
You know, just pick wisely, pick your obsessions wisely. I think you could do worse than to be into animals. And I think you could do worse than to be into literature. Right.
Yeah. So I think, I don't think historically, boys are like, oh yeah, that horse girl, she's, you know, amazing. But I think that like, she's like a symbol of like the artist, or the person who's obsessed, the person who's like blocking out the world because they found something that gives the world meaning. And I think that's, So yeah, I'm obsessed with the horse girl, I guess.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I think I have some quandary. I've been thinking about this lately where I'm not sure if I have like the right kinds of obsessions, or if like my obsessions are like so specialized that they have like no utility in like the capitalist framework in which we exist.
Yeah.
Like, like even within the book world, I think like to the average citizen, I'm like a big book nerd, right?
Mhm.
Like, but I talk to book people all the time, and I know I am not even close to like being the uber nerd that some people are, like how well read they are, how committed in like this really priestly way to their like ascetic almost in their writing practice, how productive, how they like can't function as human beings without like writing 2,000 words. You know what I'm saying? I hear
Yeah.
these things and I'm like, oh God, that's not me. Like, and yet I think what my obsession is with people who make sense of existence through books, coupled with like Buddhism and psychedelics.
You
It's
are my
some.
target demographic,
I
is
was
what
going
you're
to say,
saying.
but I mean, like that's really it. I don't know what
Yeah.
I didn't even know what the balances are. You know, if that was like
Yeah.
the triplicate of obsessions that I have, like I don't know what the percentages are for each one, but it's not like all in on something. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And like maybe that's a problem. Maybe I'd be better served if I was just all in on one thing, you know?
Yeah, but like I mean, and I have writer friends who are like this, or just friends who are readers, and they're like, "Yeah, I read 300 books last year," and I'm like, "Wait, like how?"
Okay.
And I'm like, "Are they all like 50-page books?" And they're like, "No, I read like David Foster Wallace," and I'm like, "How? When were you doing all this reading?"
And also, again, to circle back to performative, like social media, like don't tell me how many books you read on social media. Like if we're having a conversation and it comes up, fine. But
Yeah.
like, I don't need you to post like in some kind of like low key humble brag way that you read 300 books in a year. Like, first of all, if you have that much fucking time to read books, you are living on easy street. Like, are you working?
Yeah.
Or are you really like one of the few people who can actually speed read? Because I just don't fucking get it. Like 300 books in a year, that's almost a book a day.
Yeah.
Takes me
Yeah.
like 20 hours to read a book.
Yeah. I don't get it. I don't understand where, yeah, I'm a slow reader, so that in particular. But also, I do think as any kind of artist, like, I think it's really important to be a reader, but I think it's just as important to like go for a walk every day. It's important to like not be reading also and just be doing, go for a walk around your city and just like notice things and notice people. Like that to me is just as important as reading is. And then yeah, and also just having a job I think can make you a better artist, because then you have to like deal with this fucking broken world every day that everyone else is dealing with too, I think sometimes having too much time can work against you, because we're supposed to be these creatures who are struggling with all these different things and trying to find a balance, and everybody else isn't doing the same thing, and then you're immediately going to make art that people can relate to.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
If you're just in your like ivory tower, you're probably going to lose touch at some point,
I
right?
think you have to, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you've lost touch. I think you're right where the people are, especially in Portland. Just like, going out, doing drugs, drinking too much, getting mixed up with people and relationships. I mean, that's the stuff of life.
Yeah, well, hope so.
What do you like? Can I ask when you're getting married? Is there a date set? Do you have any plans, or is it all just speculative at this point? Like
um,
engagement is done.
yeah, I feel like we locked the engagement down and then we're like, oh shit, wait. Now everyone wants to know when the wedding is. Like, that's the next question. You're supposed to have these things figured out like the day after you get engaged, right?
Yeah, no, it's a lot. My wife and I basically eloped. Like we started to look at like, it was like, well, what do you want to do about table settings? And I just shut down. I was like, I have no idea. I'm not doing napkins and like centerpieces, and that is not my thing. But
Yeah.
it's great. It's exciting, man. I'm happy for you, and I'm wondering if you got anything else cooking. It's kind of a shitty question because you're just celebrating the publication of Horse Girl, but like usually there's irons in the fire. Like you got other books coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, well, nothing that I mean, this is the first time in a while, maybe like, few years where I don't have anything scheduled bookwise to be published. I haven't sold anything, but I've got like most of a 50,000 word novel that's done, and most of a 30,000 word novella that's done ish. But like, also like, sometimes I like write a book like this and I'm like, I don't know if this is the project I want to put out right now. And, sometimes I get really like vulnerable and I'm like, okay, there's consequences to writing autofiction. Real humans are involved in these things. And I'm like, maybe this one I just put on the shelf for a while. So I think right now I'm just trying to figure out what that is. Like, do I polish one of these manuscripts that I have, or do I just jump into something totally new and go a different direction
and let the stuff that's already done just sort of incubate a little bit more?
Incubate, yeah. Maybe I'll clean it up and publish it 10 years from now. I don't know, or 5 years from now. I'm not sure. That you always. And this is the part of me that's not instant gratification. Like I'm willing to like put something on a shelf and be like, it doesn't feel like this is its moment, but it might be its moment 5 years from now. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm not in like I'm not in some like panic over publication and like how often I'm publishing. Like the reality, I guess maybe if I sold a bajillion books and I felt like there was a readership that was like really there and kind of clamoring for my next thing, it might change my like orientation. But like that's like we're talking about like 1% of 1% of writers. Like nobody really is out there waiting for anything. Like you can take your time. Like there's no pressure in that way, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm someone who has to have a project in front of me, and, talking about astrology, like this is my Capricorn thing. But like, I'm just someone who does really well when I have a project in front of me, but that doesn't have, it's not about where it's going to get published or when it's going to get published. I just want to be working on something and have it feel exciting and engaging. And then after that, when I have all these semi-finished things, then I'll switch to publication mode and be like, okay, is this actually a book I want to publish? I don't ask myself that until it's basically done.
That's good though. That's the like process over result, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't care about the like the fruit. What's the Buddhist thing? Like the fruit will come of its own accord. Like the tree doesn't like sit there straining. It's just lets it kind of flower and happen. And then we'll worry about who picks the fruit later.
Maybe this is the benefit of not having an agent. I don't have to like convince someone that like, oh, I'm writing this thing for the next 2 years and then I might not publish it for 10. Like an agent might be like, what? That is a terrible idea. But
yeah, you're driving the bus.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to talk with you, man. Congratulations on the story collection. Congratulations on the engagement. Oh, and then what's this fuck, marry, kill thing?
Well, my fiance, Ryan Ashley, and I, it started out that we wanted to do like one single literary reading here in Portland. And then we're both kind of like workaholics, but in an art sense. Like we just always want to pile more on. And then somehow by the time we launched it, we decided it was also going to be a literary journal and a reading series. And so we're just launching a bunch of stuff, and hopefully it goes well.
But does it have like a bent? Like, is it like the fuck, marry, kill thing? Like, is it only for writing that is about certain topics, or is it wide open?
I mean, I think the goal is that, those words. Yeah. So like, love, sex, and death, which I think that covers almost everything though. It's a pretty wide, but I think also just, we're doing our first, reading right before Valentine's Day. And I do have this like idea that, all the genres have sort of, or, at least like sci-fi is very comfortably wedded to literary fiction. And I think fantasy is heading that direction. But I'm like, where's the literary erotica? Like where's the literary romance novel? And so I think I'm curious to see if we get, feature more of that right now. But,
where is that stuff?
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking like you have to go back to like Anais Nin before people are like, this is literary erotica, right? And so maybe it's coming. Hopefully it's coming.
Well, that stuff sells, right? Romance novels sell. Like, is there a way to maybe like get in on that action, but also be like revered as an artist in the New York Times?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the project I should be working on, my literary romance novel. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I'll be interested to see how things unfold, and congrats. Thanks for taking the time to talk.
Hey, it's great to talk to you.